I'm not sure what caused the snow in Nyandarua.
Hello and welcome back again, viewer, for joining us again here on News in Focus, where we're looking at climate change and the effects it has in the whole world, more importantly here locally in Kenya. And we are here in regards to flooding and snowing in Kenya, which we've already experienced. And I wanted us to talk about why do we have some places are so much cold while other places are experiencing too much heat. I wanted to, is it like a revolution or something? Maybe you can talk about the whole physics behind this.
Well, having some places cold and others hot depends on the placement of the sun in regard to where you're situated on the globe. So the countries in the north, when the earth is shifting around the sun, the countries in the north, sometimes the sun is very much south, and therefore the rays are not able to get into the north, and therefore they get winter, which is a very cold time. While the other countries in the south at that point are getting summer, which is a very hot time because the sun is so close. As for us who are in the equator, this is not something that we experience a lot. So what makes our places cold or hot depends on the winds that are blowing into our part of the continent. Mm-hmm. So for the places that are experiencing more snow, it is because the sun on the other side is very hot, but on this side they're receiving very little sun. This is just the way it is. Sometimes it is difficult to predict how it is going to be. Some of these are very, very short events, but that should be the normal pattern of climate.
Okay, yeah. So it is not that very well explanatory as in regards to how it really happens.
Well, some of these things are not very well explanatory. Mm-hmm. Others can be predicted. Yeah.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, let's go back to the issue of planting trees. Is there something else someone can do in regards to making a change to climate change, apart from now planting trees?
Well, I think we're calling it integrated natural resource management. It is not just planting trees alone. Mm-hmm. What happens is that you got to look at your land, look at how it is, what are the patterns of water flow, and make sure that it is all well managed. Mm-hmm. There is the issue of terracing, making sure that your land is like a bench, and therefore you're able to capture the topsoil and it remains there. There are also the issues of livestock management, because sometimes livestock also release a lot of greenhouse gases, mm-hmm. and therefore, if you do not manage livestock well, you're still contributing to climate change. There is what we are calling nowadays biogas, so it is good to utilize some of the carbon that is coming out of livestock and burn it into gas. It can be lighting or it can be cooking, and therefore that way you're saving upon the trees that would have been utilized in terms of firewood. Mm-hmm. So it is an integrated package. It is what we are now calling climate smart agriculture, looking at the entire spectrum of farm enterprises and making sure that they are well managed with climate in mind.
Let's talk about plastic bags.
Yeah.
I wouldn't want us to leave talking about this issue of plastic bag in regards to, you mentioned a little bit of greenhouse emissions. Does this also include greenhouse agriculture? Does it also include that?
Plastic bags, I think you mix two things here. There is the issue of the plastics. Mm-hmm. That is a big menace because plastics do not biodegrade. That means when you have plastics everywhere, they are going to block systems and contribute to what we are seeing, for example, in Nairobi. They are going to block drainage systems. They also actually affect livestock production, that livestock can eat them and all these things. In addition to the fact that you don't even like them when they are thrown everywhere anyway. Mm-hmm. So that is one different thing from greenhouse farming. Greenhouse farming is a system in which you're trying to control and maintain the same kind of temperature when you're trying to grow a crop. You intend specifically to raise the temperatures in your farm when you have got enough water in a way that you can quickly produce a crop faster than it would have been produced at a natural environment. So that is different from the issue of plastics. Yeah.
Okay. Talk about greenhousing. Yeah. Does it have an effect to the climate or through the weather that we experience today?
Well, there is also a confusion between what is called greenhouse gases mm-hmm. and the greenhouse farming. Mm-hmm. Greenhouse gases are called greenhouse gases because they have got what we call the greenhouse effect. Greenhouse is a place where you want to concentrate temperature. So what happens is the sun rays comes from the sun, mm-hmm. as what we call the short wavelength, and they hit the ground. Then when they come back, they come out as long wavelength when they are reflected by the sun. Because we get heated from the reflection. It is not the rays that are coming from the sun that we feel. It is a reflection that comes from the ground. That is why the atmosphere is warmer at 2 o'clock rather than 12 o'clock because the rays that came at 12 o'clock are now being reflected at 2 o'clock. Now, those long wavelengths cannot go through plastic. So when you've covered your greenhouse with plastic, it means that the sun rays cannot be reflected back, and therefore they remain in the greenhouse, and you can raise your temperatures there and make the plant grow fast as long as you have water. Now, in greenhouse gases, it is the same thing that happens, that we've got the gases forming some kind of a layer in the atmosphere which blocks the reflected wavelengths from getting back. And therefore, it concentrates and it becomes higher temperatures for us. So this is why they are called greenhouse gases. It is not that they are coming from the greenhouses that we are producing.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, so can we conclude and say plastic bags don't have any effect on climate change, or do they have an association also to an effect to climate change?
Not a great effect, but remember that plastic bags are carbon, that when they begin to be disposed in terms of burning them, then that is carbon that is all being released. So anything that you burn, you're releasing carbon, and that makes the problem worse. But as long as they have not been burned, if they are treated elsewhere, like those people that are recycling them or making posts out of them, then that is a better way of managing plastics in a climate change regime compared to just burning them and disposing them in a way that releases carbon.
Okay. With the many that know that we have climate change effects here with us, why do you think most people are still ignorant about the fact that this actually is something that is going to jeopardize our generations to come and also our lives to come later? Why do you think there's that, should I call it ignorance? Yes, maybe I should call it ignorance, for lack of a better word, that people are so stuck to the issue that everything is natural. Why do you think they're so stuck to it that we don't really want to embrace what you're saying, that if we don't take care of the environment, it'll come and actually really capture everything that we need and we want for the future?
Well, that is because natural systems do not just change drastically. They take a while to change, and they take a while, and they take a while, and then they start growing. So that by the time majority of the population begin to know, it is already too bad. The other thing is that human beings need to see the effect before they can do something. Even if it is a farming practice, I need to see that my neighbor has benefited from it before I can actually do something. However, there are some people that we call innovators. You know, they are always fast to do things. They are passionate about the environment, and they begin to be the first people to adopt practices that are useful. So why would we say ignorance has come? Because the effects were not so visible before. And that is because the effects of something that you do today are going to come far later. When you plant a tree today, you're only going to harvest the benefits 20 years down the line, or 10 years, depending on the species. But also when you do a mess today, the effects may not come immediately, but when they will come, they'll be quite brutal, like we are seeing right now.
Population is growing and rapidly, and also the urban migration from the rural areas is also growing. We're almost having another city coming up.
Yes.
And we can say, obviously, that will bring more people to towns. Now, the question is the land that's going to be utilized to build these buildings, as tall as they'll be, and the railway lines that's coming in, and also the infrastructure, it will need land. A land that we can say probably will have trees for our environment aspect. So what can you say in regards to maybe governments can embrace, private sector can embrace, and also the public in regards to utilizing a part of the land so that we can still have water? What can we do to the laws? Let me start from there, so that we can be able to have all this working out for us in the real run.
Populations are going to grow, but it is important for us to control our population growth. But secondly, we need to know that we still have enough land to produce if we can manage land well. The whole issue is about planning. It is about urban planning. It is about planning for agriculture. Agriculture was always taken as a place for failures, you know, where those people that cannot manage to get jobs in town go to practice. And therefore, we are leaving the most ignorant or potentially ignorant population, a segment of our population, to manage the most important resource of our land. And then when we come to towns, we get jobs out here. We go back to buy land and establish our own farms and employ the same people. And therefore, land management has been a key problem. So we begin by managing towns to ensure that towns do not necessarily expand without plans and therefore take up most of the agricultural land. Also manage all these building constructions and build nicely, but at the same time work with farmers as institutions, not just individual farmers, because if one farmer acts and others are not acting, it is still going to affect us. If you are in Muranga, for example, and you're the only one planting trees, and the rest of the village is not planting trees, you will not run away from the landslides when they come. You and your trees are going to go. So it is about planning, and we must begin from policymakers, beginning to embrace this as an important agenda, and therefore take planning all the way to the low levels.
Okay, let me talk to people who have, let me talk about people who live in areas where trees are not really a thing of thinking about in regards to it's dry, it's rocky, and we don't know what type of trees we can plant here because it also rains there.
Yes.
What can they do actually to also come in supporting the issue of afforestation?
Miriam, is very interesting. There is no part of this world where trees do not grow. The Creator, who I call God, and you may call whatever you want to call the Creator, ensure that for every bit of environment, some plant is able to grow, because we all need plants in the circle of life. Everybody feeds either way or another from plants. And so every part of this world, including the desert, has got trees that grow there. What farmers need to know, especially those that grow in the dry lands, is to look at what are the natural species that have been growing there and allow them to regenerate. We are seeing farmers struggle so much to plant eucalyptus, to plant gravelia, because those are the trees that people seem to think are more economical, and they struggle with them in the dry lands, getting a lot of termite problems, or the dry lands themselves have got trees that could just grow. So you begin by bringing together farmers in community groups and then planning how to regenerate land. Most of these dry lands, of course, are pastoralist communities, and therefore there's a lot of planning that is needed, because sometimes even land tenure or the land ownership is not clear, and therefore they've got to plan together. But there are plants right there which could just regenerate if well managed.
Where can we get them?
They are on the ground. It's very interesting. In our center right now, I work for the World Agroforestry Center. We are talking about some approach called farmer-managed natural regeneration. The first place that we experienced this was in Niger, where it's very dry. They get less than 300 millimeters of rainfall, which is what they get here in the very driest place of this country. And at some point, farmers were beginning to leave the belt near Sahara because they felt that nothing can grow there. But a few farmers who are resilient enough stayed there and allowed trees to grow back. When you cut a tree, you utilize the top part of the tree. There's almost a similar size of a tree that you've left below ground. And if you allow the sprouts that come out of that tree, it could regenerate our tree. How many trees have we cut for charcoal? They could always come back.
Okay.
Yeah.
Now, you talked about regeneration, and I was just trying to think, is it the same thing as budding or grafting of the trees?
Good question. Regeneration is in a way that you bring a tree back. So it comes from the word generation. It is bringing up a new generation of trees, of crops or something. And usually regeneration comes in two ways. The first way is that it just regrows, because every tree or every plant or every living organism aspires to raise a generation after it. Just like all of us, we say for our own children. So every tree has got an objective to ensure that there is something that will come out of itself. And therefore, they produce a lot of seeds that are thrown into the soil. Some of these things, especially in the dry lands, could even stay for 5 years in a dormancy, or even more years, so that whenever the conditions will be good, these trees will just germinate and produce a new tree. You can also regenerate trees by planting, where you establish seedlings in a nursery and bring them to a planting site. But the best way to do it is the trees that you've cut down, just to allow them to sprout, and they'll regenerate, they'll reproduce a whole tree after itself.
Let's talk about, it has been discovered that in Africa, climate change will hit hard. And that's why we see the drought. Also, we're experiencing things we'd never experienced before, which is snow.
Yeah.
And we have the floods coming in.
Yeah.
And would you say probably politics has been actually being incorporated when it comes to issues of climate change in Africa?
Well, it depends. Africa is going to be hit hard, and it's unfortunate because we are contributing the least to greenhouse gases. But going by where we are placed, the winds that come our way, we're going to be hit hard. That is the thing. Politics, have they been brought in? Yes, there is a lot of politics at the global level. We don't seem to agree on many things about climate change and controlling greenhouse gas emissions. But even locally, there has been a lot of politics, especially the politics around Mau. Should we restore Mau or should we not restore Mau? Should communities live in Mau or should they not live in Mau? This is local politics. I think what is important is that we've got to do some drastic actions, accept that this thing is here with us, and we need to take some action that could be painful to some people, but then the win is going to be for the whole community. And even those that may suffer pain right now could actually have a win in the future. But we cannot remain with business as usual. We cannot doubt anymore. This thing is here with us, and we must act now.
Okay. Do you also say maybe we don't have laws that actually are more stiffer to actually govern people who are living there now that we have a new constitution?
We got enough laws in this country. In fact, this country is over policed, if you could say so. There is a whole national climate change response strategy, and it is looking at all facets of climate change. The constitution is very environmental friendly, the one that we passed in 2010. It requires that we restore tree cover to at least 10%. There is a whole strategy produced by the Ministry of Agriculture, the Ministry of Education, the Ministry of Energy. All these ministries have got strategies that are aiming to combat climate change. It is the implementation, it is also the informing about policy. A study that we did recently, one of my master's students was looking at it. They saw that most of the farmers not even know these laws. They do not know these policies. And therefore, they are unable to practice. Neither are they also able to demand, to advocate from county governments, from national government, what is rightfully theirs. And therefore, unless we go back to look at our law books and want to work on them, we are not going to succeed.
Architecture is actually coming up. We've seen a lot of estates, many estates coming up, and they are embracing the issue or the value of a green architecture. Yeah. So how would you say in regards to those who are sole proprietors and they want to come up with their own building, maybe in a certain estate or with all the farm work that we're going to be having here at Machakos County, where more of the big city it's envisaged to come in? What can you tell people to do in regards to green agriculture? Because like you say, I've noticed now after doing the research, most farmers don't know that actually this can be done. This is what the law says. It's all about lack of awareness and lack of knowing the policies. What can you tell those who are actually coming up with architectural work in terms of building and such like, that they can also plant trees?
Well, I think it depends on, trees do not necessarily have to be planted everywhere. But the private sector can actually invest in terms of tree planting outside where they're impacting themselves. This is what we are calling now the carbon credits. So for example, for every carbon that you're releasing to the environment, you can buy it in another part of the world. You can get to support some small-scale farmer project that ensures that because of better agricultural practice, an equivalent amount of carbon to the one that you have utilized or you have released in your factory or in your building is able to be released, is able to be absorbed by trees that are planted elsewhere. So even those of us who are flying every day, you're releasing a lot of carbon now. We are able to work out carbon credits that every plane you try is whenever it makes a flight. And you can charge those on tickets, and that goes back to supporting communities that could actually buy back the credits. So we got poor communities here. What we need is leadership coming from the government and policymakers that allows the private sector investors to not only minimize the carbon that they are producing in terms of their planning, in terms of their strategies, but also to buy carbon credits from the farmers that could utilize some of this little money to better their livelihoods.
Okay, I wanted you to talk to two groups, to the manufacturers or the industrial department itself, let me call it department, and also talk to the Department of Agriculture, and as you summarize.
So the manufacturing industry, you got to look at all the carbon that you're producing. There are more efficient ways of producing the products that you're producing without releasing all this carbon. This is what we are calling clean energy production. So you look at your production system, you look at the technology that you're using and embrace technology that minimizes how much of the carbon that you're producing.
No, this is to the
this is industry. To industry.
All right.
But even for the carbon that you're producing, there are ways in which it can be quantified, and you can actually now partner with communities in agricultural lands that could actually buy back that carbon, and therefore you are what we call carbon neutral. Now, to the Department of Agriculture, it's been a long-raging debate as to whether trees should come to the farms or not. But I think we're beginning to all agree right now the importance of trees on farm, not just because of increased food production, but also because of climatic amelioration. And therefore, we just need to be talking together, the foresters, the agriculturists, to ensure that we got the right trees, but also better practices of production. Production of livestock, production of crops. Are we utilizing all the fertilizer that we are putting on the ground? Should all this oil that we're using on the ground because of machinery in farms be utilized? These are all the things that we should be looking at. We've got strategies in place that can ensure that we are getting the right energy production and energy utilization in agriculture. We just need to start working on that. But the time to act is actually now. We used to say in my organization, the best time to plant trees was 10 years ago. The next best time is now. Tomorrow might be too late.
Okay. I wanted you to finish with something I really did not touch on in regards to mining and how it also affects climate change. Oil mining and also we have minerals, a lot of minerals, different minerals, diamond, gold, and we are always told that when you're doing the excavation and also the drilling, it also has an enormous effect to climate change. Maybe we can talk about that as also we summarize.
Well, a lot of energy is utilized in mining, but at the same time, mining happens in places where we actually have trees, and therefore you go to displaced communities and open up wide areas of land, which usually because of the nature of mining, you're not able to bring back the plants. So it is about the utilization of energy in mining, but also the way you disfigure, if I could use that word, the environment around it, and therefore you cause a lot of carbon to get out. So while I'm not a very good mining expert, I think there are many ways in which the carbon being produced around mining can be reduced, and the Minister of Mining should be at the forefront to ensure that this is not actually happening.
Okay. Yeah. Okay, thank you so much. I just wanted to have this come out because of the issues we've always been having, and also arguments that I've also experienced out there in regards to you need to have a livelihood, but at the same time, does it mean you have to destroy environment in the process? And thank you again for putting it across so that we can be able to still have the livelihood we want, but also think of the future by utilizing what we have and also still keeping it for ourselves. Thank you for that, and thank you for coming to News in Focus tonight. Viewers, we are glad you have been with us all this time. Thank you for watching us. It has been a wonderful show. I believe that you have learned much on climate change and things that you can do to actually ensure that climate change does not effectively and negatively affect us in the future. I've been your presenter, Miriam Kanyugo. Do have yourselves a good night.